The officers who dragged Esther Williams from her garden never questioned why an 82-year-old woman moved with such controlled precision. They laughed when the station computer flashed, "Classified Level 6 access only," after scanning her fingerprints. Just another glitch in the system. But as night fell over Millfield, two men in black suits arrived demanding her immediate release. "She's more dangerous than all of you combined," they warned the dismissive desk sergeant. No one in this sleepy southern town could imagine that the silent old black woman they'd mockingly called Crazy Essie had once been SEAL 47E, the Ghost Widow, whose missions remained so classified that even mentioning her operational history was considered treason. They'd handcuffed a living legend, and she was about to remind everyone exactly why enemies had feared her name for 5 decades. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The garden gnome watched over Esther Williams's azaleas with a chipped smile and faded red hat. Esther, or Essie as she preferred, knelt beside her flower bed, arthritic fingers working the soil with practiced precision. At 82, her movements were slower than they once were, but no less deliberate. The morning sun warmed her dark skin, now lined with deep creases that mapped a lifetime of experiences few could imagine. Oak Street was quiet this Tuesday morning. Most residents were at work or school, leaving the modest neighborhood on the edge of Millfield to its daytime peace. Essie preferred it this way. Silence had been her ally for decades. "Morning, Miss Williams," called Mrs. Patterson from across the street, waving a newspaper in greeting. Essie nodded, but didn't speak. She hadn't exchanged more than 10 words with any neighbor in the 15 years she'd lived here. The town had labeled her early on, Crazy Essie, or that old mute. She didn't mind. Labels were safer than truth. She placed another bulb in the earth, patting the soil gently. Her garden was her sanctuary, the only place where memories didn't haunt her quite so viciously. Here she could almost forget Panama, almost forget Afghanistan, almost forget the faces of those she'd saved, and those she couldn't. The police cruiser rolled down Oak Street slowly, like a shark testing waters. Essie noticed it immediately. The slight change in ambient sound, the deliberate reduction in speed. Her senses, though dulled by age, remained, sharper than most people half her age. The cruiser stopped at her walkway. 2 officers stepped out, followed by a third from the passenger side. "Suspicious person call," announced the tallest officer, Sergeant Dwayne Harker, adjusting his belt, with practiced authority. "Got a report about an elderly black female lurking around the elementary school 2 blocks over." Officer Jared Beck nodded, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "Caller said she was watching the kids, acting strange." The third officer, Mallory Rice, hung back slightly. Her uniform still had the stiffness of recent issue. Her eyes darted between her colleagues and the old woman kneeling in the garden. Essie continued planting her bulbs. "Ma'am," Harker called out, stepping onto her property. "Need to have a word with you." When Essie didn't immediately respond, Beck moved closer. "Hey, he's talking to you." Essie slowly rose to her feet, knees protesting the movement. She stood 5'3" in her gardening shoes, thin but straight-backed. Her white hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing a face that gave away nothing. "Do you speak English?" Beck asked loudly, as if volume could bridge any gap. "I speak 6 languages," Essie finally said, her voice soft but clear. "English is merely one of them." Beck's face tightened. "Got a report you were hanging around Westfield Elementary earlier. Care to explain that?" "I wasn't at any school today," Essie replied simply. "So you're calling Mrs. Whitaker a liar?" Harker stepped forward. "Prominent citizen, church volunteer, wife of the bank president? She specifically described someone matching your description." Essie's eyes flicked toward the cruiser's dashboard camera. "I've been gardening since 7 this morning. Do you have anyone who can verify that?" Rice asked, her tone slightly less aggressive than her colleagues. "The birds, the mail carrier. God." Essie gestured toward her house. "And my security cameras." Beck snorted. "Right. Let's see some ID, ma'am." "It's inside." Essie turned toward her house. "Hold it!" Harker grabbed her arm roughly. "Officer Rice will accompany you." Essie looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Something in her eyes made Harker hesitate momentarily, though he didn't release his grip. "I don't consent to being touched," she said quietly, "and I don't consent to suspicious individuals." "In my town," Harker replied. "ID, now. You're hurting me." "Complying would make this easier for everyone," Rice suggested. Essie remained still, her gaze never wavering from Harker's face. "I've done nothing wrong." "That's for us to determine," Beck said, stepping closer. "Turn around." "Why?" "Because I said so." Beck spun her around roughly. The sudden movement caused Essie to stumble, knocking into her garden gnome. The ceramic figure toppled and shattered against the walkway. As handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Essie stared at the broken pieces. The gnome had been a gift from her late husband, James, one of the few personal items she'd allowed herself to keep visible. "Oops," Beck smirked. "Should have complied faster." Across the street, Mrs. Patterson stood frozen on her porch, smartphone raised. Other neighbors had appeared in windows and doorways, watching silently as the officers walked Essie to the cruiser. "You have the right to remain silent," Harker recited mechanically. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Essie said nothing as they placed her in the back seat. Her eyes scanned the gathering crowd, cataloging faces, expressions, positions, old habits. She noted which neighbors filmed, which turned away, which stared with naked curiosity. Not one intervened. The drive to the police station took 12 minutes. Essie counted each one, focusing on her breathing the way she'd been taught decades ago. In her mind, she was back in training, enduring worse. Much worse. Millfield Police Department operated from a red brick building downtown, recently renovated thanks to increased municipal funding. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Essie was processed, fingerprinted, photographed, and led to a holding cell without explanation. "What am I being charged with?" she asked once, her only question. "Disorderly conduct, resisting an irate officer, potential trespassing pending investigation," Harker replied without looking at her. "Might find more once we dig deeper." The holding cell was small with a metal bench bolted to the wall. Essie sat perfectly still, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Hours passed. No one offered water or explained the delay. Through the wide-side window in the door, she could see officers gathering, occasionally glancing her way with amusement. "Hard to believe she's the one Whitaker was so scared of," one officer commented. "Looks like she'd blow over in a strong wind." "Probably off her meds," another suggested. "These old folks get confused." Beck leaned against the wall. "You think you're above the law just 'cause you're old?" he called to her. "Special rules for special people, huh?" Essie didn't respond. She simply watched them, her face expressionless. Inside, she was mapping the station layout, counting personnel, identifying exits. Not because she planned anything. Habits formed in hell don't easily fade, even after decades of peace. At the dispatch desk, Amanda Cho frowned at her computer screen. Fresh out of police academy and only 3 weeks into her job, the 24-year-old dispatcher took her responsibilities seriously. Standard procedure required background checks on all detainees, so she'd run Essie's fingerprints through the system. The screen had flashed red. "Classified. Level 6 access only. Contact Naval Intelligence immediately." Amanda stared at the message, then glanced toward the holding cell where the elderly woman sat motionless. She checked the birth date on the preliminary booking form. 1943. How could an 82-year-old black woman's identity be classified at the highest military level? "Sergeant Harker," she called hesitantly. "There's something strange with Ms. Williams's background check." Harker barely glanced up from his coffee. "Like what? Outstanding warrants? Mental health holds?" "No, sir. It's classified. Military. Classification." That got his attention. "What?" Amanda turned her monitor so he could see. "Level 6 access. That's higher than FBI clearance." Harker's face darkened. Must be a glitch. Run it again. She did. Same result. Listen. Harker leaned close, lowering his voice. This stays between us. Probably a system error, but no need to make a big deal. Drop it. But procedure says... I said drop it. His tone left no room for argument. Clear. The screen, and don't mention it again. As Harker walked away, Amanda glanced once more at the old woman in the cell. Essie was looking directly at her, as if she'd heard every word despite being 30 feet away. A chill ran down Amanda's spine. Across town, Malik Green scrolled through his social media feed as he waited for his coffee order. Several posts mentioned a police incident on Oak Street, videos showing officers arresting an elderly black woman. He enlarged one clip, and recognition hit immediately. Ms. Williams? He muttered, downloading the video. Memories flooded back. Being 9 years old, surrounded by teenage bullies behind the corner store. Then Essie, appearing silently, saying something to the boys that made them scatter like frightened birds. She'd walked him home without saying another word, then disappeared back to her solitary existence. Malik grabbed his coffee and headed for his car. At 35, he'd spent the last decade building a reputation as an investigative journalist focused on social justice issues. Originally from Millfield, he'd returned 6 months ago to care for his ailing mother, taking a position with the local paper while freelancing for national outlets. He drove to the police station, professional curiosity and personal concern creating an uncomfortable knot in his stomach. Night had fallen by the time Essie was allowed her phone call. She dialed a number from memory, speaking only 3 words when it was answered. Shadow protocol activated. Then she hung up and returned to her cell without protest. 2 hours later, the night shift began. Essie lay on the hard bench, eyes closed but fully alert. The building had quieted, with only 3 officers visible from her vantage point. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the front door opened. 2 men entered the station. Both wore black suits, impeccably tailored. One carried a slim briefcase. Neither smiled as they approached the desk sergeant. "May I help you, gentlemen?" the sergeant asked, setting aside his crossword puzzle. "We're here for Esther Williams," said the taller man, his voice neutral. "Visiting hours are 9 to 5 and only after formal charging," the sergeant replied. "Come back tomorrow." The shorter man placed his briefcase on the counter and opened it, removing a document. "This authorizes her immediate release into our custody." Sergeant scanned the paper, snorting. "This isn't a federal facility. Your fancy paperwork doesn't mean—" "Call this number," the taller man interrupted, sliding a card across the desk. "Verify our authority." "Listen, fellas," the sergeant leaned forward. "We've got procedures here. I don't care if you're FBI, CIA, or Girl Scouts selling cookies. That woman stays put until morning." The men exchanged glances. "You don't understand," said the shorter one, his voice quieter now. "She's more dangerous than all of you combined," the sergeant laughed. "Right. The 80-year-old gardener is Jason Bourne." 82, corrected the taller man. "And no, not Bourne. Much worse." Something in his tone made the sergeant pause. He looked toward the holding cell where Essie appeared to be sleeping peacefully. "Who is she, really?" "Call the number," the taller man repeated. Now, in the quiet of her cell, Essie closed her eyes and let herself remember. Not the garden or the handcuffs or the broken gnome, but 1965. The impossible test that changed everything. She was 22, standing on a beach in Virginia with 40 men. The only woman, the only black person, all volunteers for an experimental program so classified even the regular SEAL teams didn't know about it. Diversity token, one instructor had sneered. Won't last a day. She lasted. Through swimming, trials that drowned 2 men, through endurance tests that broke another's spirit, through pain that would have hospitalized most soldiers. She set records, broke bones, healed, broke more bones, healed stronger. By the end, even the instructors stopped talking, just watched, her with a mixture of respect and fear. She became SEAL 47E. The E officially stood for Experimental Unit. Unofficially, they called her the Executioner, a legend buried under layers of classified documents and redacted reports, a ghost who completed missions that officially never happened, a widow who eventually retired to grow flowers and forget. But memory, like muscle, never truly forgets its training. Morning light filtered through the small window of Essie's cell, casting bars of shadow across the concrete floor. She'd been detained for nearly 24 hours now, given only a paper cup of water and a stale sandwich. It didn't bother her. She'd once survived 14 days in a hole in the ground with nothing but rainwater. Malik Green sat in his parked car outside the police station, reviewing his notes. He'd spent the night researching, calling contacts, digging through databases. The fragments he'd uncovered made little sense individually, but together they formed a disturbing pattern. Panama, 1989, reports of a shadow operative extracting high-value targets during the invasion. Described as unusually small in stature, but terrifyingly efficient. Afghanistan, early 2000s. Whispered stories among Taliban fighters about the ghost. Widow, a phantom who could enter secured compounds undetected, always described as death wearing a woman's skin, and a code name that appeared in heavily redacted documents. SEAL 47E Malik's phone rang. A source from the Pentagon, a former classmate now working in intelligence. Whatever you're digging into, stop, his friend warned without preamble. That code name you asked about? It triggered alerts across 3 agencies. Who is SEAL 47E? Malik pressed. I can't even confirm that designation exists. But hypothetically, if it did, you'd be poking a hornet's nest filled with classified operations spanning 50 years. Is it Esther Williams, the woman arrested yesterday? Silence then. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything. But Malik, be careful. Some ghosts don't like being disturbed. Inside the station, Sergeant Harker stood at his desk, face flushed with anger as he crumpled a form in his fist. Request denied, he snapped at Amanda. I told you to drop this. Sir, it's procedure to complete a background verification on all detainees, Amanda insisted, keeping her voice professional despite her nervousness. The system flagged inconsistencies that... The system glitched, Harker interrupted. End of story. But the men who came last night were federal bureaucrats overstepping their jurisdiction. Harker tossed the crumpled form into the trash. This is my department, my town, my case. He leaned closer. Keep pushing this, Cho, and you'll be directing traffic at the elementary school until retirement. Amanda watched him storm away, her mind racing. In 3 weeks on the job, she'd witnessed numerous procedural violations, but this felt different, personal, as if Harker had something to prove or something to hide. The dispatch desk computer required a password to access the restricted database, but Amanda had an advantage the sergeant didn't know about. Her father, James Cho, had been a military intelligence officer before his death 3 years ago. His old clearance codes, technically obsolete but sometimes still functional in legacy systems, might work. During her lunch break with the office, nearly empty, she tried the backdoor access her father had once shown her, for emergencies only. To her surprise, the system accepted the credentials. What she found made her blood run cold. Photos, decades old but unmistakable. A younger Esther Williams in military fatigues, face streaked with camouflage paint. Another showed her dragging, a hooded figure through jungle terrain. Another in desert gear, a rifle in hand, surrounded by what appeared to be special forces operators, all male, all deferring to her. Amanda downloaded what she could, then carefully erased her digital footprints. Whatever was happening went far beyond a simple false arrest. As evening approached, a distinguished black man in his 70s arrived at the E station. He wore a tailored navy blue suit with military precision, his bearing unmistakably that of someone accustomed to command. I'm here to see Esther Williams, he announced to the desk officer. Name? Admiral Carlton Briggs, retired. The Chiker officer raised an eyebrow. Relationship to the detainee? Briggs's expression remained neutral. Old colleague. 15 minutes later, Briggs was escorted to Essie's cell. The officer unlocked the door but remained nearby, pretending to organize paperwork while straining to hear their conversation. Briggs sat on the bench beside Essie, who hadn't moved from her position. "Never thought I'd see you in a place like this," he said quietly. "Never thought I'd see you in a suit," she replied, the faintest smile touching her lips. "The men I sent couldn't get you out. I didn't expect them to. This isn't about a simple arrest." Briggs nodded. "Harker." His father was Colonel Harker. "Kandahar," Essie said, understanding immediately. "The dishonorable discharge. His son's been looking for revenge ever since. When your fingerprints hit the system, he must have recognized the name." They sat in silence for a moment, two old warriors speaking volumes without words. "They're not ready to know who you really are they?" Briggs finally asked. Essie turned slightly, gazing through the small window at the darkening sky. "I didn't survive all that just to die in a town full of cowards." After Briggs left, the night grew quiet again. But the digital world was anything but silent. Malik had spent hours crafting a detailed thread. "The woman they fear. Who is SEAL 47E?" With carefully selected documents, redacted reports, and witness statements from veterans, he painted a picture of an extraordinary operator whose existence had been deliberately erased from military history. The thread went viral within hours. SEAL 47E and Justice. For Essie began trending. Suddenly, all eyes were on the Millfield Police Department. By morning, pressure was mounting. National media picked up the story. The mayor called the police chief, demanding answers. Protesters gathered outside the station with signs, "Free Essie Williams" and "Who are the real criminals?" Sergeant Harker paced his office, fury radiating from him in almost visible waves. He summoned Officers Beck and Rice. "This ends now," he growled. "We've got probable cause to search her property for contraband. Who knows what an ex-military type might be hiding? Weapons, explosives." Rice shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with all the attention on this case, shouldn't we wait for— Are you questioning my orders, officer?" Harker's voice dropped dangerously. "No, sir," she replied automatically, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Good. You and Beck head over there now. Find something, anything we can use to justify holding her. This woman is not making a fool of my department." The search of Essie's home was methodical but fruitless at first. The modest house was sparsely furnished, almost ascetic in its simplicity. No weapons, no contraband, just books, basic furniture, and gardening supplies. Then Beck found the bedroom closet. Inside, a shadow box hung on the wall, containing military medals, not Essie's. Her service remained classified, but her late husband's. James Williams, Army Special Forces, killed in action in 1982. "Jackpot," Beck muttered, removing the shadow box from the wall. Hidden behind it was a small safe. "We don't have a warrant for that," Rice pointed out. Beck ignored her, examining the safe. "Probably full of illegal weapons. That's reasonable suspicion right there." Despite Rice's protests, Beck called for a department technician to open the safe. Inside was a single item, a worn leather journal filled with what appeared to be coded entries. "Evidence," Beck declared, bagging the journal. On their way out, he deliberately knocked the shadow box to the floor, shattering the glass and scattering James Williams' medals across the hardwood. Rice stared at the fallen medals, then at her partner. Something shifted in her expression. Doubt, crystallizing into certainty. This wasn't law enforcement. This was cruelty. That afternoon, due to mounting public pressure and a stern call from the governor's office, Essie was released without charges. She stood on the station steps, facing a small crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. She said nothing, asked for nothing, simply walked away with the same quiet dignity she'd shown throughout her detention. But inside, calculations were being made. Lines were being drawn. Essie Williams hadn't survived 5 decades of impossible missions by being passive. She walked 12 blocks to a small hardware store tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. Behind the counter stood a Latina woman in her 60s, her once black hair now streaked with silver. Sharp eyes took in Essie's appearance, noting the faint bruising on her wrists from the handcuffs. "Heard you had some trouble," the woman said. "Nothing I can't handle, Tracker," Essie replied. Tina. Tracker. Melendez smiled slightly at the old call sign. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 15 years, not since James's funeral. But some bonds transcend time and distance. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" Tracker asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Essie glanced around the store, ensuring they were alone. "You still got the rifles?" Tracker's smile faded. "The M40A5s? From Damascus?" Essie nodded once. "Basement storage. Never could bring myself to get rid of them." Tracker studied her old commander carefully. "This isn't just about an unlawful arrest, is it? They took James's medals, and my journal." Tracker's intake of breath was sharp. "The encrypted one? With all the— Yes. Jesus, Essie." Tracker came around the counter. "You really want to do this? At our age?" Essie's gaze was steady, revealing a glimpse of the woman she'd once been. The operator who'd led the most feared special operations unit in history. "Age is just a number, Tracker, and some debts never expire." As darkness fell over Millfield, Essie sat alone on her porch surveying her damaged garden. The broken gnome had been swept away, but the memory remained. In the quiet evening, she allowed herself to remember one more mission, the one that had nearly broken her. Desert air, thick with sand and gunpowder. The year was 1997. Her team had been tasked with eliminating a terrorist leader responsible for bombings across 3 continents. The intelligence was solid, the plan flawless, until they found the children, dozens of them, held in a compound adjacent to the target's location. Human shields, the analysts called them later. Collateral damage, acceptable under the mission parameters. Essie had made a different call. Extraction first, target second. The children survived. The terrorist escaped. Her team completed the kill 3 weeks later, but the damage was done. Essie had disobeyed a direct order. No medal would come from that mission, but neither did nightmares of dead children. It earned her the silent respect of every operator who served with her afterward, and the watchful suspicion of those who valued mission completion above humanity. Now, decades later, that choice still defined her. She would not stand by while injustice occurred, even when standing meant revealing secrets long buried. The soft chime of her phone interrupted her thoughts. A text message from an encrypted number. Journal contents being decoded. Harker knows what's inside. Moving to phase 2. Essie deleted the message and stood up, her decision made. Millfield had no idea what it had awakened, but it was about to find out. The morning sky over Millfield hung heavy with gray clouds, matching the tension that had settled over the town in the 3 days since Essie's release. Mayor Franklin Wells sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at the mounting stack of emails, voicemails, and written complaints from citizens across the country. "This is a disaster," he muttered, loosening his tie. At 58, Wells had served as mayor for 12 years, running the town with a careful blend of Southern charm and political pragmatism. Now, that carefully constructed image was crumbling before a national spotlight. His assistant knocked lightly before entering. "Chief Sullivan is here, sir." Police Chief Thomas Sullivan entered, his uniform immaculate, but his expression grim. At 64, he was nearing retirement, and had hoped to coast through his final years without incident. "Tom," Wells gestured to a chair. "We need to clean up this mess. Now." Sullivan nodded, settling his bulk into the seat. "I've placed Beck on administrative leave pending review. Harker's fighting it, but I've ordered a full investigation into the arrest." "That's not enough." Wells tapped his computer screen displaying Malik Green's latest article. "This journalist is turning our town into a symbol of everything wrong with American policing. The governor called me this morning, Tom. The governor." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Williams was released. No charges. Filed. Make it right. Wells insisted. Publicly. Apologize to the woman. Fire someone if necessary. But fix the optics before this ruins us all. Across town, in the dimly lit chambers of the county courthouse, Judge Kenneth Voss reviewed the motions filed that morning by Sergeant Harker. The elderly judge removed his reading glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. You want me to sign a psychiatric evaluation order? For Williams? Harker stood rigidly before the bench, his posture betraying his military upbringing. Yes, Your Honor. We have reason to believe she presents a danger to herself and others. Based on what evidence? Voss asked skeptically. Her erratic behavior, during arrest, reports from neighbors describing paranoid tendencies, and her military background suggests potential PTSD or other disorders. Harker slid a folder across the desk. We're concerned, given her access to potential weapons. Judge Voss leafed through the documents. Most were statements from concerned citizens that read suspiciously similar. He recognized Caroline Whitaker's signature, the bank president's wife and a prominent donor to his re-election campaigns. You realize this case has national attention now, Voss cautioned. All the more reason to ensure public safety, Harker replied smoothly. Better safe than sorry. After a moment's hesitation, Voss signed the order. Proceed with caution, Sergeant. Very careful caution. What neither man knew was that Officer Mallory Rice had stationed herself outside the judge's chambers, recording their conversation on her phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she stopped the recording and slipped away unnoticed. 20 minutes later, she sat in her car across from a small coffee shop downtown, watching Malik Green through the window. The journalist was typing furiously on his laptop, surrounded by notebooks and documents. Rice took a deep breath, checked her uniform in the mirror, and exited the vehicle. She'd taken an oath to protect and serve. It was time to decide who that oath truly served. Inside the coffee shop, Malik barely noticed the young officer approach until she stood directly before his table. He looked up warily. Officer Rice, what can I do for you? She glanced around nervously before sliding into the seat opposite him. I need to know if you're serious about exposing what's happening in Millfield. Dead serious, Malik replied, studying her face. Rice reached into her jacket and removed a small evidence bag containing a worn leather journal. This was taken illegally from Ms. Williams's home. Harker sent me to log it into evidence, but... She hesitated. I can't be part of this anymore. Malik stared at the journal, understanding its significance immediately. You could lose your job for this. I already resigned. Effective immediately. She slid the journal across the table. It's encrypted somehow. I don't know if it's useful, but it is, Malik assured her, carefully taking the journal. More than you know. That evening, Malik and Amanda Cho sat in his apartment poring over the journal. The pages contained what appeared to be random sequences of numbers and letters, interspersed with occasional map coordinates. It's definitely a military cipher, Amanda said, comparing entries. My dad taught me a few basic ones, but this is beyond anything I've seen. Your father was in intelligence? Malik asked, surprised. Amanda nodded. 20 years. Died 3 years ago. Heart attack. She traced a sequence of numbers with her finger. Wait, look at the groupings here. It's similar to a cipher he showed me once. A variant of a Vigenère square with positional shifts. For the next 4 hours, they worked methodically, testing combinations and patterns. Shortly after midnight, Amanda let out a gasp. I think I've got it, she whispered, hastily scribbling on a notepad. The key is Spectre 1992. If we apply that to the first entry. The decoded message read, Extraction successful. HVT secured. 3 hostiles eliminated. No team casualties. SEAL 47E mission complete. Entry after entry revealed similar reports, missions spanning decades across global hotspots, each signed with the same designation, SEAL 47E. Names appeared throughout. Warlords captured, politicians rescued, traitors exposed. My God, Malik murmured, scanning a particularly detailed entry from 1987. These aren't just mission logs. They're insurance. Insurance? Evidence, in case something happened to her. He pointed to a list of names near the back of the journal. Look familiar? Amanda leaned closer. Kenneth Voss, isn't that our county judge? And according to this, Malik flipped to the decoded entry. In 1982, then-Lieutenant Voss compromised a hostage extraction in Beirut by selling intelligence to arms dealers. That's treason, Amanda whispered. And Essie Williams has proof. Malik closed the journal. No wonder Harker is so desperate to discredit her. The next morning, dawn had barely broken when a sleek black Lincoln Town car pulled up outside Judge Voss's sprawling, colonial home in Millfield's most exclusive neighborhood. Essie Williams stepped out, dressed not in her usual gardening clothes but in a fitted black trench coat, her white hair pulled back severely. The judge's housekeeper answered the door, startled by the early visitor. I need to see Kenneth, Essie said simply. Tell him it's an old acquaintance from Beirut. Minutes later, she was shown into Voss's private study. The judge stood by the window in a silk bathrobe, his face ashen. You, he said, voice barely above a whisper. After all these years, Essie remained standing, her posture perfect, despite her age. I'd hoped never to see you again, Kenneth. What do you want? His hand trembled as he poured himself a generous whiskey, despite the early hour. You signed an order yesterday. Psychiatric evaluation. Voss swallowed hard. Harker made a compelling case. Save it. Essie's voice remained soft but carried an edge sharper than any blade. You and I both know what this is about. Beirut, 1982. The glass in Voss's hand shook violently. That was 40 years ago. Classified operations. No one would believe. 4 American hostages died because of you, Essie cut in. I have names, dates, account numbers. And now, thanks to your friend Harker, my insurance policy is being decoded as we speak. What do you want? Voss asked again, desperation creeping into his voice. Rescind the order. Recuse yourself from any matters concerning me. And retire, Kenneth, before month's end. Or, Essie smiled, a small cold thing without humor. Or I ensure that the last thing people remember about Judge Kenneth Voss isn't his distinguished career, but his dishonorable discharge and the blood on his hands. She turned to leave, but Voss called after her. Williams, you think you're untouchable? There are powerful people who do anything to keep those old missions buried. Essie paused at the door. I'm counting on it. By noon, news broke that Judge Voss had rescinded the psychiatric evaluation order and announced his recusal from all matters concerning Esther Williams, citing potential conflicts of interest. The statement raised more questions than it answered, particularly for those following Malik's reporting. As Essie walked home from the bus stop that afternoon, she sensed the tale immediately. Male, mid-30s, trying too hard to look like a local in a town where everyone knew everyone. He kept pace half a block behind her, occasionally speaking into what appeared to be a Bluetooth earpiece. She made no indication she'd noticed him, continuing her usual route with the unhurried pace of an elderly woman. When she stopped to examine flowers in the park, he paused to tie his shoelace. When she entered the corner market, he waited outside, pretending to check his phone. Amateur, she thought. They'd sent an amateur. Inside her house, Essie moved efficiently, placing her handbag on the kitchen counter before filling a glass with water. Through the window, she watched her shadow take position across the street, partially concealed by a large oak tree. Precisely 7 minutes later, the power in her house flickered momentarily, the signal she'd been waiting for. Without hurrying, she moved to her bedroom, opened the closet, and pressed a hidden panel behind where her husband's medals had once hung. The false wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage to the basement. The hitman made his move at dusk. Dressed as a utility worker, he approached the back door with a clipboard and fake ID. Finding it unlocked, he slipped inside, drawing a silenced pistol from his work belt. The house was silent and still. A single lamp burned in the living room. A half-empty glass of water sat on the kitchen counter. He moved methodically through each room, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. When he reached the bedroom, he noted the open closet, the empty hooks where metals had once hung. The blow came from behind, swift, precise, and devastating. A forearm across his throat, applying pressure to the carotid arteries with surgical precision. He tried to bring his weapon up, but a sharp twist of his wrist sent white-hot pain up his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Darkness closed in as his oxygen depleted. His last conscious thought was confusion. How could an 82-year-old woman move like that? When he awoke, he was seated on the cold marble base of Millfield's town square fountain, hands and feet bound with zip ties. A small crowd had gathered, some taking photos, others calling the police. Around his neck hung a handwritten sign, "Tell them SEAL 47E is watching." The morning news coverage dominated local and national broadcasts. "Mystery vigilante apprehends. Armed intruder," the headlines proclaimed. The hitman refused to speak, but his credentials were quickly proven false, and his weapon contained no serial numbers. At the Millfield Herald office, Malik fielded calls from major networks seeking interviews or collaboration. His story had exploded, bringing attention not just to Essie Williams, but to decades of classified operations that had shaped global politics from the shadows. "Mr. Green," his editor called from the doorway. "Someone tampered with your car." Security called the police. In the parking lot, Malik stared at his sedan. The brake lines had been cleanly cut, visible fluid pooling beneath the vehicle. A message was keyed into the driver's door. "Drop the story." He was still processing the threat when his phone rang. "Amanda. Someone broke into my apartment," she said without preamble, her voice shaking. "They took my laptop, my files, everything related to the journal." "Are you safe?" Malik asked urgently. "I'm at my mother's." "But Malik." "They left a note. They know about my father, about his access codes." Before he could respond, a text message appeared on his screen from an unknown number. "Town fountain, 20 minutes, come alone." Malik arrived at the fountain with 5 minutes to spare, scanning the nearly empty park with nervous eyes. He'd brought a small canister of pepper spray, meager protection, but better than nothing. "You won't need that," came a soft voice from behind him. He spun around to find Essie seated on a bench, feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons as if she had no concerns in the world. "They cut my brake lines," Malik said, sitting beside her. "I know. I fixed them after the police left." At his surprised look, she added, "Mechanical engineering was part of my training. Amanda's apartment was broken into. She's safe. That's what matters." Essie continued feeding the birds. "But you're not, Malik. Neither of you are. This goes beyond Harker or Voss. The journal was meant to be found eventually, just not yet." She turned to face him fully. "They'll kill you both to keep those secrets, unless we give them something bigger to worry about." "What do you have in mind?" "I need time. 3 days." Essie's eyes held his with intensity that belied her years. "Can you get somewhere safe until then?" Malik thought about it. "My cousin has a cabin upstate, off the grid. Take Amanda, go today. No phones, no internet. 3 days. And then?" Essie smiled slightly. "And then we remind some powerful people why they called me the Ghost Widow." As Malik and Amanda headed for safety, Essie began moving, with the quiet efficiency that had once made her legendary among her peers. Her first stop was a small veterans housing complex on the outskirts of town. Reggie Watson answered his door on the third knock. At 75, the former communications specialist's body had grown frail, but his mind remained razor-sharp. His hands moved in quick, precise signs, American Sign Language, which he'd used exclusively since losing his hearing in an explosion 30 years earlier. "Essie," he signed, surprise and delight crossing his weathered face. "Long time." "Too long," she signed back. "Need your help, old friend." Inside his apartment, technology filled every surface: computers, monitors, satellite equipment, and devices Essie couldn't even identify. Despite his disability, or perhaps because of it, Reggie had become one of the most talented communications experts in the intelligence community before his retirement. "They're after the journal," she explained. Through sign language. And the kids who found it. Reggie nodded thoughtfully. The journalist, Green, good writer. You've been following his work? Reggie grinned. Follow everything. Bored in retirement. His fingers flew as he continued. What's the play? Gathering the team. Need your skills, communications, surveillance. His eyes lit up with the spark of a mission. Equipment and storage, give me a day. Next, Essie visited a group of teenagers who frequented the community center where she occasionally volunteered. 6 young people, 4 black, 2 white, all from the poorer side of town, all with potential being wasted in a system designed to overlook them. Ms. Williams, 17-year-old Jamal greeted her with respect. Saw you on the news. That wasn't my choice, Essie replied, taking a seat among them. Those cops did you dirty, said Keisha, a 16-year-old with bright eyes and quick hands. Whole town talking about it. The town talks, but who acts? Essie asked quietly. The teens exchanged glances. What you mean? Asked Darnell, the youngest, at 15. I mean, this town has problems bigger than one old woman being arrested. Problems that affect your futures more than mine. Essie looked at each face in turn. I don't have much time left on this earth. You all do. Question is, are you ready to fight for it? By evening, Essie had set up a makeshift headquarters in Reggie's apartment. Maps of Millfield covered one wall with key locations marked: the police station, courthouse, mayor's office, and the homes of Harker, Beck, and other players in the unfolding drama. Reggie's fingers moved rapidly. Surveillance equipment active. Police radio frequencies tapped. Email servers compromised. Good. Any movement on Harker? Reggie nodded, pointing to a monitor showing a real-time GPS tracker. Planning something. Made calls to private security contractors, ex-military types. A raid, Essie concluded. They'll come for me tonight or tomorrow. Let them come. As darkness fell over Millfield, Sergeant Harker gathered a team in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. 6 men in tactical gear checked weapons and equipment. None of it standard police issue. This operation is off the books, Harker informed them. Williams is a national security threat. Evidence suggests she's in possession of classified materials and potentially dangerous weapons. What about warrants? One man asked. Covered. Harker lied smoothly. Judge Voss signed everything this morning. We move at 0200 hours. Quick, clean entry. Secure the target and any materials. Questions? There were none. These weren't regular officers but private contractors accustomed to operating in gray areas. One more thing, Harker added. This stays quiet. Far as anyone knows, this is a standard department operation. Understood? Across town, Malik and Amanda had barely reached the outskirts when Malik's phone rang. Despite Essie's warning, he answered. Mr. Green, came a familiar voice. This is Mayor Wells. I'd like to meet, privately. It's about Esther Williams and what's really happening in Millfield. Malik hesitated, looking at Amanda. I'm afraid I'm unavailable at the moment, Mayor. Son, people are going to get hurt if this continues. I can help, but I need to talk to you first. No games, no politics, just truth. After a moment's consideration, Malik agreed to meet at a diner just outside town limits in 30 minutes. He turned the car around, despite Amanda's protests. Essie said 3 days, she reminded him. If the mayor's willing to talk, this could be important, Malik argued. We'll be careful. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived. Mayor Wells sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked older than his press photos, the lines in his face deeper, his eyes tired. Thank you for coming, he said as Malik and Amanda slid into the booth. And for bringing Ms. Cho. Her father was a good man. Amanda stiffened. You knew my father? Not personally, but his reputation preceded him. Wells glanced around before continuing in a lowered voice. What you've stumbled into goes far beyond Millfield. Judge Voss made some calls after Williams visited him, calls to people who don't officially exist. Division 9, Malik guessed, recalling a heavily redacted reference in Essie's journal. Wells' eyebrows rose slightly. You've done your homework. Yes. An intelligence unit so classified even most of the Pentagon doesn't know it exists. They clean up loose ends. Like Essie Williams? Amanda asked. Like anyone who threatens certain narratives. Wells slid a thumb drive across the table. Everything I could access about what's happening. Harker's planning a raid tonight. Private contractors. Shoot first. Questions, never. Malik pocketed the drive. Why are you helping us? Wells smiled sadly. I've been mayor for 12 years. Before that, I was a history teacher. I've watched this town rot from the inside while pretending everything was fine. Maybe I'm too old to keep pretending. What do we do with this information? Amanda asked. Get it to Williams, then get somewhere safe. Wells stood, placing money on the table for his coffee. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone with a badge. Rain fell in sheets across Millfield as 2 a.m. approached. Essie sat alone in her darkened living room waiting. Her house had been prepared. Cameras hidden in strategic locations, tripwires set, escape routes cleared. She'd lived long enough to know when a storm was coming, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. Tonight, both. Her phone vibrated with a text from Reggie. 6 men, tactical gear, ETA 3 minutes. Essie placed the phone on the coffee table and closed her eyes briefly. At 82, her body protested the lack of sleep, the stress, the constant vigilance, but her mind remained razor sharp, cycling through scenarios and contingencies with practiced ease. The first indication of the raid was subtle, a momentary disruption in the power to the security cameras Reggie had installed. Amateur move. Second was the soft crunch of boots on wet gravel around the side of the house. Essie slipped silently into the kitchen as a black-clad figure approached the back door. The lock was picked with practiced efficiency. The door opened without a sound. 2 men entered, weapons raised, scanning with tactical lights. They moved through the kitchen toward the living room where a single table lamp created a small pool of light. In the center of that light sat Essie's rocking chair, empty and still. Clear. One whispered into his comm. The second man moved toward the hallway. Bedroom next. Neither noticed the small device Essie had left on the kitchen counter, a modified signal booster connected to Reggie's equipment across town. Every word, every movement was being transmitted live to multiple secure servers. As the team spread through the house, their frustration mounted. Room after room yielded nothing. No Essie, no weapons, no classified documents. She's not here, the team leader reported to Harker, who was monitoring from a van parked 2 blocks away. Search again, Harker ordered. She has to be there. Sir, the house is empty. There's nothing here except... The man paused, noticing something on the kitchen table. Hold on, there's a note. Written in elegant script on a piece of stationery was a simple message. Still too slow. Miles away, in the office of the Millfield Herald, Editor-in-Chief Sarah Jenkins arrived early to prepare the morning edition. What she found waiting in her inbox stopped her cold. Dozens of video files showing 6 armed men illegally entering and searching Esther Williams's home, along with audio recordings of Sergeant Harker ordering the raid without a warrant. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. The truth about Millfield PD, publish or delete. Your choice. By dawn, the story was everywhere. Local TV interrupted regular programming. Social media exploded with clips of the illegal raid. Phone lines at the police station and mayor's office jammed with calls from outraged citizens and media outlets. Reggie's fingers flew as he signed to Essie, who sat calmly in his apartment watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. Perfect. Execution. Phase 1 complete. Harker, she asked. Reggie switched to a feed showing the police station. Called emergency meeting. Department in chaos. 3 officers resigned this morning. Across town, Malik and Amanda watched the same coverage, from the safety of a motel room 30 miles outside Millfield. The thumb drive from Mayor Wells had provided crucial evidence corroborating everything in Essie's journal, and more. Look at this, Amanda said, pointing to a document on her laptop. Operational directives for something called Project Ghost Shield. It mentions Division 9 and... She paused, eyes widening. A list of SEAL team members from classified units. Essie's name is here, along with others. And dates of termination. Termination? Malik leaned closer. You mean, they've been eliminating their own operators. Cleaning house. Amanda scrolled through the document. Essie is one of the last still alive. Malik's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. It's time, came Essie's voice. Return to Millfield, Town Hall, noon tomorrow. Is it safe? No, she replied honestly, but necessary. Bring everything you have. As evening approached, Essie made her way to her own home, slipping past the news vans and curious onlookers who had gathered nearby. Using a neighbor's yard as cover, she accessed her house through a cellar entrance hidden beneath an old gardening shed. The raid had left her home relatively undisturbed. HeartScars team had been professional enough not to cause obvious damage, but they'd missed what she'd come for. In the backyard, beneath a flowering dogwood tree, lay a small granite marker commemorating her late husband. Essie knelt beside it, her fingers finding the hidden catch that few would notice. The marker shifted slightly, revealing a small compartment underneath. From it, she removed a waterproof bag containing a USB drive, a small key, and a worn photograph of herself and James on their wedding day. She tucked these into her pocket just as her phone vibrated with a warning from Reggie. Police approaching. 2 minutes. Essie replaced the marker and moved quickly through the shadows toward the street behind her property. As she disappeared into the gathering darkness, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of her house, lights flashing. The next morning dawned clear and cool. By 11 a.m., a crowd had gathered outside Millfield Town Hall. Residents, journalists, activists drawn by the unfolding story. Mayor Wells had called an emergency session to address recent police actions and community concerns. Inside, the council chambers filled quickly. Chief Sullivan sat stiffly at one side of the room, several officers behind him. Notably missing were Harker and Beck. Judge Voss's seat remained empty, his absence explained by a sudden health concern. At precisely noon, the chamber doors opened. Essie Williams entered, flanked by Malik Green and Amanda Cho. The room fell silent as the unlikely trio made their way to the front, where Mayor Wells had arranged for them to speak. Essie approached the microphone first. Despite her age and small stature, she commanded the room's full attention. When she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering. My name is Esther Williams. For 40 years, I served this country in ways that will never appear in history books. I've been called many things, operative, agent, ghost, but I have always considered myself simply a soldier doing her duty. She placed a small device on the podium, a secure tablet Reggie had prepared. What happened to me last week was not an isolated incident. It was the symptom of a disease that has infected not just this town, but institutions meant to protect all citizens. With steady hands, she activated the tablet, projecting images onto the large screen behind her. Documents, photos, mission logs, evidence of decades of operations conducted by special units like hers, alongside evidence of corruption, reaching from Millfield to Washington. I came to this town seeking peace in my final years. Instead, I found the same enemies I spent my life fighting. Those who abuse power, who believe certain lives matter less than others, who hide behind badges and benches while betraying the by oaths they swore. From his seat, Chief Sullivan shifted uncomfortably. Several council members whispered urgently to each other. Today, I present evidence of crimes committed by Judge Kenneth Voss, Sergeant Dwayne Harker, and others within this community's leadership. Their actions not only violated my rights, but endangered national security and betrayed public trust. As she spoke, a commotion erupted at the back of the chamber. Judge Voss had arrived, pale and sweating, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. He pointed a trembling finger at Essie. She's lying. This is a fabrication, a conspiracy to... His words cut off abruptly as he clutched his chest, face contorting in pain. He collapsed to the floor as several people rushed to his aid. In the ensuing chaos, Sergeant Harker burst through a side door, his face twisted with rage. He spotted Malik filming the proceedings and lunged toward him, drawing his weapon. You did this, he shouted. You and that traitor. Before anyone could react, a blur of movement intercepted him. 16-year-old Keisha, using the defense techniques Essie had taught her, executed a perfect sweep that sent Harker crashing to the floor. His gun skittered across the polished tiles. Two other officers, their faces grim, moved in to restrain their sergeant as he thrashed and shouted. "You don't even know who she really is!" Harker screamed as they dragged him toward the exit. "She's just the beginning. They're everywhere." Outside the chamber, paramedics worked on Judge Voss, who had suffered an apparent stroke. The live feeds, capturing the dramatic scene, ensured that millions witnessed both his collapse and Harker's meltdown. As order slowly returned to the chamber, Essie reclaimed the microphone. Her expression revealed nothing of the turmoil around her. "What you've seen today is just the beginning," she said quietly. "The truth has been buried for too long, beneath layers of secrecy and intimidation. But no secret lasts forever." She looked directly into the cameras, her gaze unwavering. "To those who think power makes them untouchable, remember this. I spent 50 years in shadows watching. I'm not the only one. We're still here. Still watching." With those words, she stepped away from the podium. The room erupted in questions and exclamations, but Essie moved through the crowd with quiet dignity, Malik and Amanda close behind. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the town square. As they descended the town hall steps, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The rear door opened, revealing a familiar face, Admiral Carlton Briggs. "That was quite a show, Essie," he said as she approached. "But you've stirred a hornet's nest. Division 9 is mobilizing." "Good," Essie replied calmly. "Let them come into the light for once." "It won't be just local cops next time," Briggs warned. "These people have resources, influence. So do I." Essie glanced back at the town hall, where more people were emerging, many talking excitedly into phones or cameras. "The most powerful weapon was always the truth, Carlton. You taught me that." Briggs smiled sadly. "And you were always my best student." He handed her a sealed envelope. "Security protocols for the next 48 hours. Safe houses, emergency contacts. Use them." As the Admiral's vehicle pulled away, Essie turned to Malik and Amanda. "This isn't over. The most dangerous phase is just beginning." "What happens now?" Amanda asked. Essie's gaze drifted to the horizon, where storm clouds were gathering once again. "Now we prepare for war." Behind them, atop a building across the square, a figure watched through high-powered binoculars. He spoke quietly into a secure comm line. "Target identified. Williams is compromised. Operation Spectre protocols are now active." The voice that responded was cold and precise. "Understood. Cleanup team en route. Containment is priority alpha. No witnesses." In the gathering dusk, as residents of Millfield continued their normal routines, unaware of the forces converging on their town, Essie Williams returned to her modest home for what might be the last time. In her bedroom closet, she pressed the hidden panel, revealing the secret passage. Deep in the basement, beyond another hidden door, lay a room unknown even to James, a room she had prepared decades ago for a day she hoped would never come. Steel. Cabinets lined one wall containing weapons, equipment, and supplies that had waited patiently for years. Maps and dossiers filled another wall, insurance against enemies both foreign and domestic. A custom communications array connected to satellites few knew existed. Essie ran her fingers along the cool metal of a case containing her most prized possession, an M40A5 sniper rifle that had accompanied her on her final official mission. The weapon felt like an old friend in her hands as she lifted it from its resting place. "Never thought we'd dance again, old friend," she whispered, checking the mechanism with practiced ease. As she prepared for what was to come, Essie allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Age had taken much from her: speed, strength, endurance. But it had given her something in return: perspective, and the wisdom to know that some battles couldn't be won through violence alone. This would require strategy, allies, and the courage to finally step from the shadows into the full light of day. Outside, rain began to fall once more as darkness settled over Millfield. A storm was coming, in more ways than one. But for the first time in decades, Esther Essie Williams, once the most feared operative in American history, found herself not dreading the fight, but welcoming it. Some ghosts, after all, weren't meant to rest in peace. The morning after, the town hall confrontation. Millfield awakened to a community transformed. Judge Voss remained in intensive care following his stroke. Sergeant Harker sat in a county detention center 2 towns over, denied bail as a flight risk, and for the first time in decades, the entrenched power structure that had governed the small southern town lay in ruins. Mayor Wells stood at the window of his office, watching satellite news vans line the street below. His phone hadn't stopped, ringing since dawn. Calls from the governor, state representatives, even a senator's chief of staff. Everyone wanted distance from the scandal. Everyone wanted assurances that their own connections to Millfield's corruption remained buried. "Another press inquiry, sir," his assistant said from the doorway. "CNN this time." Wells nodded wearily. "Tell them I'll issue a statement at noon." As the door closed, his secure line rang. The phone only 3 people had the number to. He answered, cautiously. "This is Wells, Mr. Mayor." The voice was male, cultured, with the faintest trace of a New England accent. "I represent concerned parties at the state level. We need to discuss your guest." "Williams?" "Precisely. Her sudden prominence presents certain complications." Wells sank into his chair. The woman was wrongfully arrested, harassed, and targeted. The complications were created by my police department, not by her. "Your police department isn't sitting on 5 decades of classified operations, Mayor." The voice hardened slightly. "Governor Fletcher is concerned about the security implications. Division 9 has issued a containment directive." "Containment?" Wells repeated, a chill running through him. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means handle this locally and quietly, or others will handle it their way. Either Esther Williams stops her crusade voluntarily, or she'll be stopped, for national security reasons, of course." After the call ended, Wells sat motionless, staring at the phone. 20 minutes later, he drafted his resignation letter. Some positions weren't worth the cost to one's soul. Across town, Essie sat at Reggie's kitchen table, reviewing security footage from cameras they'd placed throughout Millfield. Amanda and Malik worked nearby, organizing the evidence they'd gathered. 3. Unmarked vehicles entered town limits during the night, Reggie signed, his movements quick and precise. Government plates obscured. 6 operatives minimum. Essie nodded, unsurprised. Division 9 protocol. First wave is surveillance only. They're mapping routines, identifying allies. Division 9. Malik looked up from his laptop. That was mentioned in the mayor's files. Ultra-secret intelligence group, Essie explained, her voice matter-of-fact. Created in the late 1960s to handle operations too sensitive for conventional agencies. No congressional oversight. Black budget. Answerable only to a special committee within the Pentagon. "And they're after you because," Amanda prompted. "Because I know things that could destroy careers, reshape alliances." Essie's eyes grew distant. "Operations in countries we claim to support. Assassinations disguised as accidents. Governments toppled for corporate interests. And they think exposing Millfield's corruption will somehow lead to all that coming out?" Malik asked skeptically. "No," Essie replied. "They think I've decided to burn it all down on my way out. And they're not entirely wrong." Her phone buzzed with a text from an encrypted number. She read it silently, her expression unchanging. "What is it?" Amanda asked. "Nightmares," Essie said simply, setting the phone down. "The past never stays buried, no matter how deep you dig the hole." That night, as Essie finally allowed herself a few hours of sleep on Reggie's couch, the dreams came, vivid, violent, memories of a mission she'd spent 30 years trying to forget. Kandahar Province, 1992, Operation Spectre. Her team, 6 of the most elite operators ever fielded, inserted under cover of darkness to eliminate a high-value target with terrorist connections. The intelligence was perfect. Too perfect. They walked into an ambush. Heavy fire from 3 directions. Jackson took the first round, right through his throat. Martinez and Cooper went down covering their retreat. Thomas bled out in her arms as they hid in an abandoned structure, his last words a whispered warning. Someone knew we were coming, Ghost. Only she and Williams, James, her husband, made it to the extraction point. But the helicopter never came. They fought their way out over 3 days, covering 60 miles of hostile territory on foot. When they finally reached base, the mission was already being erased from records. Equipment failure, the official report read. Communication breakdown. But Essie knew better. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had wanted them all dead. She woke with a gasp, heart pounding, sheets damp with sweat. For a moment she was disoriented, the line between past and present blurred. Just a dream, she whispered to herself. Just a memory. But even as she said it, she knew it was more. After all these years, the pieces were finally aligning. The betrayal in Kandahar, the creation of Division 9, the systematic elimination of her former teammates over the decades. She reached for her phone and texted Reggie in the next room. Need everything on Admiral Richard Klein. Now. Morning brought a fresh wave of media attention to Millfield. National outlets had picked up Malik's story, framing it as everything from a civil rights crusade to a conspiracy thriller. Job offers flooded his inbox. 7-figure book deals, television rights, speaking engagements. $3 million for exclusive rights to your story and Williams. Amanda read from an email, whistling softly. That's life-changing money, Malik. He closed the laptop with a decisive click. It's not my story to sell. Instead, he drafted a press release donating his existing coverage to veterans advocacy groups and survivor networks dedicated to supporting those who'd been silenced by the system. Within hours, he was being hailed as a hero on social media and targeted again by anonymous threats. By afternoon, a troubling shift began in Millfield's public sentiment. A small but vocal group of residents gathered outside City Hall with signs reading "No more media circus and peace for Millfield." Local business owners complained about the disruption to commerce. Parents expressed concerns about all this military talk around impressionable children. Tanner Wilson, a real estate developer with connections to Judge Voss, gave interviews, framing Essie as a militant elderly woman with a questionable past, training neighborhood kids for God knows what. The fact that she'd merely taught self-defense classes at the community center was deliberately omitted. Amanda noticed the pattern first. They're using classic counterinsurgency tactics, she observed, tracking the coverage. Isolate the target, question their motives, turn public opinion. It's working, Malik admitted, showing them a local poll where support for Essie had dropped 15 points overnight. Of course it's working, Essie replied calmly. It's Division 9's specialty. Before you eliminate a threat, you ensure no one will miss them. Her phone rang, Tracker's number. Essie answered immediately. We have a problem, came Tracker's tense voice. Someone's watching the shop. 2 men, professional setup. Get out now, Essie ordered. Go to... The explosion cut off her words. Through the phone came the sound of shattering glass and collapsing metal. Then silence. Tracker? Tracker. Essie's voice rose with rare urgency. Nothing. Within 20 minutes they received news. A gas leak explosion had destroyed Tina Tracker Melendez's hardware store. She'd survived but was hospitalized with severe injuries. The official report made no mention of the sophisticated drone seen hovering nearby moments before the blast. That evening, Reggie discovered surveillance bugs in Essie's home, military-grade technology embedded in the electrical system. Hours later, Doc Shelley, the 4th member of Essie's old team, missed their scheduled check-in. His apartment was found empty, coffee still warm on the counter. The message was clear. Division 9 was eliminating loose ends. It's me they want, Essie told Malik that night as they regrouped in a motel 30 miles from Millfield. The rest of you should disappear. New identities, new locations. And let them win? Malik shook his head firmly. This is bigger than Millfield now. This is about decades of covered-up crimes. You don't understand what we're facing, Essie insisted. These people erase problems permanently. They have resources, political cover, and absolutely no accountability. Then we need to make them accountable, Amanda said, looking up from her laptop. "We need to bring everything into the light." Essie was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Finally, she nodded once. "There's something I need to show you both." She led them to her car and retrieved a weatherproof case from a hidden compartment beneath the spare tire. Inside was a worn metal box containing photographs, microfilm, and a small recording device. "During Operation Spectre in 1992, my entire SEAL unit was ambushed. Only my husband and I survived," she explained, her voice steady despite the pain behind her words. "We were told it was bad intelligence, a tactical failure. But James never believed that." She held up a microfilm strip. "He spent years gathering evidence, tracking money trails, communications. He believed someone high in command sold us out." "Did he find proof?" Malik asked. "He died before he could confirm it." Essie's expression hardened. "But I continued his work, and I believe I know who betrayed us. Admiral Richard Klein." "The same Klein who now heads Division 9, Amanda realized. "The same man who's been systematically eliminating everyone connected to Operation Spectre for 30 years. Essie carefully replaced the items in the box. "He's buried evidence, silenced witnesses, rewritten history." "Why?" Malik pressed. "What happened on that mission that was worth killing for?" Essie met his gaze steadily. "We weren't sent to kill a terrorist. We were sent to eliminate a CIA whistleblower, an American agent who discovered illegal weapon sales to the same insurgent groups we were supposedly fighting. The kind of scandal that would have ended careers and led to criminal charges against some very powerful people. Including Klein," Amanda concluded. "Including a man who's now risen to near the top of the Pentagon's power structure." Essie closed the case with a decisive click. "A man who can't afford to have an 82-year-old woman with a perfect memory and a file full of evidence start talking to journalists." Later that night, alone with her thoughts, Essie stood by the motel window watching rain streak the glass. In her hand was a faded photograph of her SEAL team, 6 faces, young and determined, unaware of the betrayal awaiting them. They thought. "I was buried," she whispered to the ghosts of her past. But legends aren't buried. They're called upon when the world forgets how to be brave. In the bathroom, she opened the hidden compartment in her small traveling case. Inside lay the tools of her former trade, specialized equipment, encrypted communication devices, and the means to become someone else entirely if necessary. A hidden room within a hidden life. It was time for the ghost widow to emerge from the shadows once more. Dawn broke over an abandoned fishing cabin 50 miles north of Millfield. Inside, 4 people gathered around a makeshift planning table. Essie, Reggie, Amanda, and Malik. Maps, diagrams, and surveillance photos covered every surface. "Final team assembled," Reggie signed, his weathered hands moving with precision despite arthritis. "We're all that's left." "It's enough," Essie replied with quiet confidence. She studied the building schematics before them, a secure facility outside Washington, D.C. labeled simply Analysis Center on official documents. In reality, Division 9's operational headquarters. "Objective remains clear," she continued. "Expose Admiral Klein and Division 9 for what they truly are, a criminal enterprise masquerading as national security." "How?" Amanda asked, doubt creeping into her voice for the first time. "We're 4 people against an entire intelligence apparatus." "Numbers don't win battles," Essie replied. "Information does." She tapped a section of the blueprints. "Klein keeps physical backups of all sensitive operations here, including Operation Spectre." "Physical backups?" Malik looked skeptical. "In the digital age?" "Klein is old school. Doesn't trust networks that can be hacked." A ghost of a smile crossed Essie's face. "But he never considered someone might simply walk through the front door. The plan took shape over the next several hours. Reggie would handle technical support and communications. Amanda would use her father's credentials to access digital systems as a distraction. Malik would prepare the information for public release, and Essie would enter the heart of the beast. "There's something else," Amanda said suddenly, looking up from her laptop. I've been searching for Doc Shelley using emergency services channels. He's alive. Relief flickered across Essie's features. Where? Veterans Shelter in Richmond. Registered under his birth name, William Shelton. Smart. Essie nodded approvingly. Using a name that would trigger alerts if anyone searched specifically. For Doc Shelley. Classic misdirection. 4 hours later, Essie and Malik sat in a nondescript sedan outside the Richmond Veterans Support Center. The facility, a converted warehouse, provided housing and services for homeless veterans, no questions asked. Wait here, Essie instructed. I'll find him. Inside, the center bustled with activity. Veterans of various ages receiving meals, medical care, and support. Essie moved through the space with practiced ease, her trained eyes scanning for her old teammate. She found him in the medical clinic, not as a patient, but as a volunteer. At 78, William Doc Shelley had lost weight since she'd seen him last, but his hands remained steady as he bandaged a young veteran's arm. Impressive technique, Essie commented quietly as she approached, though you always did have the steadiest hands in the unit. Doc froze momentarily, then continued his work without turning. Thought you might be dead by now, Commander. They tried, she replied simply. Only when he finished with his patient did Doc face her. His eyes, still sharp despite the years, assessed her condition automatically. You look like hell, Essie. Charming as ever, Doc. They moved to a private corner of the facility, speaking in low tones. They came to my place, Doc explained. 3 men, professional cleanup crew. I recognized the pattern from Beirut, 85. How did you get out? A thin smile crossed his weathered face. Left out the bathroom window while they were picking the front door lock. Age hasn't made me completely useless. Far from it, Essie assured him. We need you, Doc. One last mission. He studied her face. This about Klein? Spectre? She nodded once. About damn time. From his pocket, he withdrew a small memory card. Been carrying this for 30 years. Footage from our body cameras during Spectre, the ones that supposedly malfunctioned. Essie's eyes widened slightly. You kept a copy. Insurance policy, Doc shrugged. Never thought I'd live long enough to use it. Back at the cabin, with Doc now added to their small team, they reviewed the footage. Grainy night vision images showing the ambush, the desperate fight for survival, and most damning of all, a brief radio transmission intercepted during the chaos. Packages compromised. Terminate all members of Spectre team. No witnesses. Confirmation code Kilo 9 Alpha. Klein's personal authorization code, Essie confirmed, her voice hollow. He sent us in to die. The following day, Amanda made her move. Using her father's old credentials and Reggie's technical guidance, she infiltrated a Department of Defense server through a carefully constructed back door. I'm in, she announced after 2 tense hours, searching for files related to Operation Spectre. The results were chilling. A folder marked Sanitized contained detailed reports of the operation, not as it had actually occurred, but as Division 9 had rewritten it. More disturbing was a second file titled Remaining Liabilities. It's a kill list, Amanda whispered as the document opened. Names, locations, surveillance reports. At the top of the list, Esther Williams. Status, priority target. They've been tracking you for years, Malik noted, scrolling through the extensive file. Even before all this happened in Millfield. Of course they have, Essie replied calmly. I'm the last one who knows the whole truth, the last loose end. Not anymore, Doc interjected, holding up the memory card. Now we all know. With the evidence secured, they finalized their plan. Malik had been invited to participate in a nationally televised debate on police reform, featuring a Pentagon spokesperson representing the military's perspective on community policing. The perfect opportunity to take their revelations public. Remember, Essie cautioned as they prepared. Klein, we'll have security teams in place. The moment we move, they'll try to shut us down. Let them try, Reggie signed defiantly. I've got surprises ready. The day of the broadcast arrived with tense anticipation. Malik took his position in the studio, wearing a specially designed lapel pin containing Reggie's miniaturized transmission technology. The Pentagon spokesperson, a polished lieutenant colonel named Warren, seemed relaxed and confident as makeup artists prepared them both for the cameras. Meanwhile, Essie, Doc, and Reggie positioned themselves in a van 3 blocks away, monitoring feeds and preparing their technical intervention. Amanda remained at the cabin, maintaining their secure communications and backup systems. 2 minutes to air, came the director's voice over the studio speakers. Malik took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the documents and evidence they'd prepared. In his earpiece, Essie's calm voice provided final instructions. "Wait for my signal. When Reggie activates the override, you'll have approximately 90 seconds before they cut the feed. Make them count." The debate began smoothly, with standard talking points about community relations and accountability. Lieutenant Colonel Warren presented the military's perspective with practiced ease, emphasizing transparency and cooperation. At precisely the 17-minute mark, Essie gave the signal. Reggie's fingers flew across his specialized equipment, executing a complex series of commands that bypassed the network's security protocols. Across the country, television broadcasts suddenly interrupted, with an emergency override signal. Confused anchors and viewers watched as their screens filled with classified documents, surveillance footage, and damning evidence of Division 9's decades of illegal operations. In the studio, Malik seized his moment, speaking directly to the cameras. "What you're seeing is evidence of a secret intelligence unit called Division 9, responsible for assassinations, cover-ups, and the elimination of American service members who threaten to expose the truth. Led by Admiral Richard Klein, this organization has operated without oversight for decades, committing crimes in the name of national security." As he spoke, Doc's footage from Operation Spectre played on screens nationwide. The ambush, the desperate fight, the damning radio transmission with Klein's authorization code. Lieutenant Colonel Warren's face drained of color as he recognized what was happening. He reached for his phone, only to find all signals jammed by Reggie's countermeasures. Exactly as Essie had predicted, security teams converged on the studio within minutes, but the damage was done. The broadcast had reached millions before being cut. Social media exploded with screenshots, clips, and calls for investigation. Back in Millfield, residents watched in stunned silence as their small-town controversy expanded into a national security scandal. But the peaceful evening was shattered when black SUVs with tinted windows rolled into town, Division 9's response team, coming to eliminate loose ends and control the narrative. Their first target, Essie's home and any supporters who might harbor evidence or knowledge. What they didn't expect was the reception waiting for them. The teens Essie had trained, now joined by dozens of community members, formed a human barrier around her property. Armed not with weapons, but with cameras, live streams, and unwavering resolve. "We're not afraid anymore," 16-year-old Keisha declared to a masked operative who attempted to push through. Behind her, a wall of citizens stood firm, phones recording every move. The Division 9 team, trained for shadows and secrecy, found themselves paralyzed by the sunlight of public attention. Every action they took was broadcast instantly to thousands of viewers. Every threat was documented and shared. For the first time, the ghosts who operated in darkness found themselves exposed to the disinfectant of daylight. Miles away, at a private airstrip outside Washington, D.C., Admiral Richard Klein prepared for emergency extraction. His decades of careful manipulation were unraveling hour by hour as more evidence surfaced and more operatives abandoned their posts. As his security team loaded essential documents onto a waiting Gulf Stream, a figure emerged from the shadows of the hangar. Klein's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, then froze as recognition dawned. "Hello, Richard," Essie said quietly, stepping into the pool of light cast by the aircraft's exterior lamps. "It's been a long time, Williams." His voice remained controlled despite the situation. "I should have known you'd be hard to kill. You always were. Not for lack of trying on your part." She moved closer, her gait steady despite her age. "Kandahar, my team, my husband. All these years of looking over my shoulder." Klein's security team raised their weapons, but he waved them down with a practiced gesture. It was never personal, Esther. Just necessary cleanup. Necessary? Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. You sold out your own operators to cover up illegal weapons sales. You betrayed everything the uniform stands for. I protected this country's interests. You protected your career, your power. Essie's voice remained measured, but carried an edge sharper than any blade. And now it's over. Behind her, Doc Shelley emerged from the shadows, followed by 2 FBI agents, the real ones, not Division 9 operatives wearing borrowed authority. Admiral Richard Klein, one agent announced formally. You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of American military personnel. As the agent secured Klein, Essie stepped forward one last time. From her pocket, she produced a small recording device, one last piece of insurance James had left behind. Confess, she said simply. For the families who never knew the truth. For the ghosts who deserve peace. Faced with the weight of evidence against him and the certainty of prosecution, Klein finally broke. His confession, detailed, damning, and complete, was recorded for posterity and justice. As dawn broke over the airfield, Essie watched the FBI vehicles depart with their high-value prisoner. Doc stood beside her, both veterans finally seeing. The mission completed after 30 years. What now, Commander? He asked quietly. Essie looked eastward, where the sun was painting the sky in shades of promise. Now we remember the fallen, and learn to live in the light. The congressional hearings began 3 weeks after Klein's arrest. Representatives from both parties demanded answers about Division 9's decades of unsanctioned operations. Military oversight committees convened emergency sessions. The Secretary of Defense announced the immediate suspension of all black budget intelligence units pending comprehensive review. Through it all, Essie Williams remained silent. Despite subpoenas and invitations to testify, she sent only a written statement. Let the ghosts speak for themselves. The evidence tells their story better than I ever could. The media labeled her a hero, a whistleblower, a patriot. Politicians sought photo opportunities. Book publishers offered 7-figure advances. Hollywood producers pitched movie deals. Essie declined them all, returning to her modest home in Millfield to tend her garden. The broken gnome had been replaced by a simple stone marker bearing the names of her fallen teammates from Operation Spectre. 2 months after Klein's arrest, a black limousine arrived at Essie's door. Inside sat the President of the United States, who had diverted from an official Southern tour specifically to meet her. Ms. Williams, the President said, stepping onto her porch. It's my honor to finally meet you. Essie offered coffee, which they drank from mismatched mugs at her kitchen table. No aides, no cameras, no ceremony, just 2 Americans having a conversation about service and sacrifice. When the President left an hour later, Essie held a small velvet box containing the Medal of Valor and official documentation acknowledging her as the longest-serving, most decorated, and first black woman SEAL team leader in American history. The nation may never know all you did, the President had told her, but we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. The following Saturday, Essie held a quiet ceremony in the Millfield Veterans Cemetery. Doc Shelley stood beside her, as did Reggie Watson. Tracker, still recovering from her injuries, attended in a wheelchair. Together, they honored the members of their unit who had fallen in Kandahar 30 years earlier. Malik filmed the gathering with Essie's permission, producing a documentary he titled The Last Watch. In it, he captured not just the ceremony, but the stories behind each name. Lives of extraordinary courage that history had nearly forgotten. They weren't just operators, Essie told the camera in a rare interview. They were fathers, sons, husbands. They had dreams beyond the battlefield. Jackson wanted to open a fishing charter. Martinez had designs for a children's hospital in his hometown. Cooper wrote poetry that would break your heart with its beauty. The documentary became Malik's most celebrated work, earning accolades and ensuring that the fallen would be remembered not as classified designations, but as human beings who had given everything for their country. Amanda Cho's career took an Unexpected turn when she was offered a senior position in the newly formed Government Oversight Committee for Intelligence Operations. After careful consideration, she declined. "I've seen what happens when power operates without accountability," she explained to Essie over tea. "I can do more good from the outside." Instead, she established a veterans advocacy group, naming it SEAL 47 in honor of Essie's unit. With funding from sympathetic donors and Malik's book proceeds, the organization provided legal support, healthcare assistance, and community for veterans whose sacrifices had been classified out of history. The Ghost Widow Files, Malik's comprehensive book about Essie and the Division 9 scandal, became an instant bestseller. True to his word, he directed all proceeds to programs supporting underprivileged youth in communities like Millfield. "These kids need to know their power," he told interviewers. "They need to see that one person standing up can change everything." In Millfield itself, profound changes took root. Officer Mallory Rice was appointed interim police chief after Sullivan's resignation, implementing reforms that emphasized community engagement and accountability. The town council, now led by a diverse coalition of citizens including some of the teens Essie had mentored, passed measures ensuring transparency in local government. Most visibly, the town square, once dominated by a Confederate monument, now featured a new installation, a bronze statue depicting not Essie herself, she had refused such recognition, but an abstract representation of justice with the names of every SEAL she had served with, engraved on its base. 6 months after the Division 9 revelations, as summer heat gave way to autumn crispness, Essie sat on her porch swing watching neighborhood children play in the street. The weight that had shadowed her for decades had finally lifted, allowing her to simply be an elderly woman enjoying the peaceful rhythms of community life. A young girl, no more than 12, with dark skin and determined eyes, broke away from the group and approached Essie's yard. She hesitated at the gate, gathering courage before speaking. "Ms. Williams," she called, "my grandmother says you train SEALs, the toughest soldiers in the world." Essie regarded the girl with quiet amusement. "Did she now?" "Yes, ma'am." The girl straightened her shoulders. "I want to be strong like you. Think I got what it takes?" For a moment, Essie saw herself at that age, determined, fearless, unaware of the impossible barriers society would place before her. Then she smiled, a genuine expression that softened the weathered contours of her face. "Only one way to find out," she replied, gesturing for the girl to join her on the porch. As autumn deepened toward winter, Essie found a new rhythm to her days. Mornings in the garden, weather permitting, afternoons mentoring young people at the community center, evenings with books or occasionally visitors, Doc, Reggie, Tracker, Malik, or Amanda, sharing memories and creating new ones. The nightmares came less frequently now. The ghosts of her past had found some measure of peace. One crisp December morning, Essie retrieved her mail to find an official envelope bearing Pentagon insignia. Inside was a letter on heavy stock paper, classified, Eyes Only 2, Commander Esther Williams, SEAL 47E. From Office of Naval Special Warfare. Subject, Advisory Position Commander Williams, in light of recent restructuring and your unique historical perspective, your consultation is requested on classified operations requiring your expertise. Your insights would be invaluable in ensuring ethical execution and oversight of critical missions. Should you accept this advisory role, appropriate security protocols will be established at your convenience. The nation has need of your wisdom, once more. Essie read the letter twice, then carried it inside. In her study, she unlocked a drawer containing the Medal of Valor and her husband's recovered medals, placing the letter alongside them. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting her garden in pristine white. She watched it for a long moment, thinking of all the winters she'd seen, in jungles, deserts, mountains, and finally here in this small town that had become home. A soft smile touched her lips as she picked up her phone and composed a simple text to Doc, Reggie, Tracker, Malik, and Amanda. Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Apparently we're not done yet. Then she walked to her closet, pressed the hidden panel, and descended to the basement room that housed her past. The weapons and equipment remained in perfect condition, maintained by hands that had never forgotten their training. "Let's get to work," she said to the empty room, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded the most elite operators in history. The Ghost Widow had emerged from the shadows not to fade away, but to ensure that those who followed would walk in light. What would you risk to uncover the truth that powerful forces have spent decades trying to bury? If this story of an underestimated hero's fight against corruption moved you, like, subscribe, and share to join our community of seekers who understand that legends never truly fade. They simply wait for the moment when the world needs them most.